So it would have seemed that I was a good boy this year and definitely not on that naughty list. And if you want to see what Santa Claus dropped down my chimney, then you just wait until after these. So hello friends, and a Merry Christmas indeed to you, because it is video game pickups, but it's the Christmas edition, meaning I didn't have to spend a single penny on any of these items for myself. Santa Claus dropped them all off personally on the 25th of December. Now I'm going to show these off in the same way as I would show off any other pickups, starting with current gen and working my way back to any juicy retro at the end. And first up we have a PlayStation 5 game, and it is House of Ashes, the Dark Pictures Anthology. Now I just can't go on enough about the Dark Pictures Anthology games because they truly are a breath of fresh air. Well, when I say that, being a gamer for over 40 years, it's quite easy for me to see where games have not so much changed but just slightly evolved a bit, and that's where the Dark Picture Anthology games fall into it. Because back in the 80s, when you were a little bit tired of that arcade action, especially when it came in a coin munching form, we lucky few with microcomputers at home could turn to text adventures, and not only that, graphic text adventures. Where those graphics and text adventures evolved was onto point and click adventures, another genre that captivated me in the 90s, and then it has evolved into, well, this, the Dark Picture Anthologies, and this one being the House of Ashes. Now not every one of the releases in this anthology have been an ultimate banger, and the game Little Hope, which predated House of Ashes, is probably the weakest one in the series, but with House of Ashes this one came back stronger than ever. Fantastic story, as they tend to have throughout these anyway because they're story based games, but the graphical improvements in House of Ashes, especially running on a PlayStation 5, were quite sublime. Now I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting on in age, so the eyesight is not quite what it used to be, but let me tell you, especially on the PlayStation 5, there were some scenes in this game when I couldn't tell, honestly couldn't tell, whether I was looking at live footage or computer graphics, and that is something special. So that's the House of Ashes coming into the physical collection. Already had it digitally thanks to Retro Rivals. I won a competition in one of their live streams and that fed that need at the time. But the physical, that's the way to go, that's the way we all want to go, and it's in the collection now. Now next up we're moving on to the Switch, another console that I'm slowly starting to appreciate more and more, and mostly because of HD remasters, modern retro, and just taking us back a step in time. And the first game is no exception to that, because it is Ukulele and the Impossible Lair. Now I can't talk too much about Ukulele at the moment because I haven't had a chance to play it, and I'll be frankly honest, my better half will probably get around to this long before I do. But what I will point out is that wonderful little icon in the bottom right corner, Team 17. Now anyone who's not aware of Team 17, they are responsible for some of the greatest games from the past. Well, at least greatest in my opinion anyway, games like Worms and Super Frog and a whole host more. So it was an absolute no-brainer to get Ukulele and Impossible Lair into the collection, and I will be looking out for the other Ukulele game too, but that's Ukulele and Impossible Lair into the collection where it will stay forever. Next up we're staying with the Switch, but we're staying firmly rooted in modern retro, and I don't suppose you can get much more modern retro than new and tasty Abe's Odyssey. And very much like Ukulele, it's going to be my better half that will get to this game long before me, because that's why this game is in the collection. It's in her part of the collection, not so much mine. That's not saying I don't absolutely love Oddworld and the rest of the Oddworld games, it's just if there was ever going to be a fight over the collection, well, this one would definitely be going her way. Now I do have this on digital for the PlayStation 4, and the best reason for having a physical copy in the Switch collection is quite simply this: if the better half does take the notion to play new and tasty, well, I don't have to get chucked off the PlayStation. And of course, when it comes to building my own personal Switch collection, I have to point out that HD remasters and modern retro is definitely the avenue I'm going down with the console. So new and tasty, Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey, and that's a mouthful, into the collection forever. Next up we're moving on to the PlayStation 4, and it's another game that's in the digital collection that needs to be in the physical collection, and that game is Little Hope. And yes, it's another one of the Dark Anthology games, and I do love this series of games, I can't stress that enough, and I'll keep saying it over and over again. Now when it comes to Little Hope, in my opinion anyway, this is the weakest game in the series. That by no means it's a bad game, it just means when you're coming off the back of games like Until Dawn and Man of Madan, then the players like myself have much higher standards for the next game. Now it's not a terrible game, it's not a weak game, it's just the weakest game in the series for me anyway, but that's Little Hope coming into the collection physically, where it will stay forevermore. Next up, we're staying with the PlayStation 4 and we're staying with the Dark Pictures Anthology, because it is Man of Madan. Now you have to remember that Man of Madan was the game that followed Supermassive's Until Dawn, and Until Dawn was one of those games that took everyone by surprise. A new dev team putting together a fairly new style of game and absolutely knocking it out of the park with that very first game. Now it's not as long of an experience as Until Dawn, and of course we didn't have the same wow factor because we'd experienced that style of new gameplay that Until Dawn delivered, so it wasn't quite as new and fresh and tasty, but it was still a solid outing for their very first Dark Pictures Anthology game. Now for me, the story in Man of Madan is absolutely pitched perfectly, as is the location as to where the game takes place. Now of course, being a story driven game, I don't want to go into too much detail, well none at all, because I want you to experience that for yourself, because if you haven't played the Dark Pictures Anthologies and started with Man of Madan, then I can heartily recommend that you should go out and play this whichever way you can. So that's the Dark Pictures Anthology, the Man of Madan, into the collection forever. Staying with the PlayStation 4 but moving away from the Dark Picture Anthologies, you'll be glad to hear, is another game that I didn't know was out there, but a game that I'm collecting for a subset on the earlier PlayStation consoles, and that is Disgaea 1 Complete. Now I had no idea that this game was out there for the PlayStation 4, and as much as I'm looking forward dipping into the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 Disgaea games, discovering that this series seems to have had an HD remaster or port anyway onto the PlayStation 4 is just great news. Well, great news for me anyway, because my preferred way of playing is just to hook up the main console, which is the PlayStation 5, and play games that way. I will dip into the retro consoles, I will play the original games, but this way it's just so much easier, and I wish more companies, more development teams and more publishers would get their act together when it comes to putting together HD remasters of classic games. So that's Disgaea 1 Complete for the PlayStation 4 into the collection, and I'm over the moon about that. So sticking with the PlayStation 4 and also sticking with Disgaea 4 Complete, and yes, I'm over the moon about having this as well, because quite simply if I can get all the games on these HD remasters, it's just going to be a much easier way for me to sit and play them, a more comfortable way anyway. And before there's any hate, yes, I will get round to playing the original hardware and software for these games, but for me I just love it when companies, developers and publishers put these together and just make these games accessible for so many more people. So if you're listening out there, any developers or publishing houses, then get on the HD bandwagon. This is what a lot of fans want to see, especially when it comes to the older and harder to get stuff. So Disgaea 4 Complete into the collection, and very happy about that. So next up and last up for the PlayStation 4 is a game that I hinted was winging its way to me as we spoke during my last pickups video. If you recall that, if you don't, go back and watch it, but if you recall that, it was Yakuza Zero. Now this is probably the finest prequel game that I've ever played in my life, and I'd go as far as to say of all the mainline Yakuza games, and I've only got number 6 to play, that Yakuza Zero is the finest game in the whole series. But that is a whole series of bangers. To be honest with you, the only one that slightly let me down was Yakuza 3, but even at that, it was still an 8 out of 10 game, hands down, no questions asked. Because for me, the Yakuza series has everything that a game needs, well, everything that a game needs for me. It has a fantastic core story, you have got fantastic action, RPG elements, so many mini games that you probably would never get round to playing them all, and just the right amount of lunacy and hijinks to make these games extremely funny when they need to be funny. Now if you haven't played the Yakuza games before, I can heartily recommend them, but go back, play Zero first and then run through the rest of the series back to back, because that's basically what I've done with them. That's how good they are, or that's how good I feel they are. So Yakuza Zero finally got this physical copy into the collection with the rest of its brothers. Next up, we're moving away from Sony and moving on to Nintendo, and we're dropping down a few generations as well, because the game that I picked up was Donkey Konga. Now I got Donkey Konga in this case, but not in this box, and by that, well, you'll just have to wait until further on in the video. But Donkey Konga, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's a rhythm game that I've never played, and I didn't really buy it for the game anyway. And again, you'll just have to wait and see, because Donkey Konga is in the collection for whatever it's worth, and it's going to stay there. Next up, we're moving away from Nintendo and onto the mighty Sega, and we're dropping down some generations again because I picked up, or got gifted anyway, Quackshot and Castle Illusions Twin Pack. And quite simply, the reason I asked for this one was for Quackshot. I do have Castle of Illusion in the collection already in its own little box, and it's a wonderful looking game that I enjoyed back in the day and still enjoy today. But Quackshot was one that I'd never got round to, and it's one that I really want to play. And probably the biggest reason I want to play it is that plunger mechanic. You have that plunger gun to shoot into the walls to make your own platforms, and I thought that's a fantastic idea, a great mechanic from back in the day. So I'm looking forward to finally getting round and playing Quackshot on the Mega Drive, or Genesis I suppose if you're from North America. Now moving on, we're moving away from the games and onto peripherals, because there were several peripherals that I was looking to add to the collection that I wouldn't necessarily buy for myself or even think about for myself, and mostly it's to play games better, and I want to play Quackshot better, so I got the Retrobit 8-button arcade pad for the Mega Drive. Now I say playing the game better using this, but playing it just the way it should be played, because all it is in essence is a new controller. I have opted to go for the wired version because for some reason I just think when you're playing the retro machines, I don't quite trust the wireless options that you get out there. Maybe I'm wrong. If anyone wants to sing the praises of one of the wireless options for any of the retro consoles, and then you just drop down in the comments with that. But for me, it just had to be this lovely translucent blue 6-button arcade pad, wired, so I can sit down and play Quackshot with a new controller, because in all essence that's what it is. It's a new controller for the Mega Drive, or Genesis for my American friends out there. Now the next peripheral that got gifted to me was something again that I wanted, that I wouldn't necessarily get into the collection, but it is a peripheral to make a game play better. Well, actually not in this case, it's to make it play differently, because there we go, the Donkey Kong Bongos. Now of course Donkey Konga came with it, the game came in the box with the bongos, but I'll be frankly honest with you, as I said with the game, I'm not that interested in the game itself, but using these bongos to play Soul Calibur. And if you don't believe me, then you just check over at Ginger Hippie Gaming, because he has shown time and time again that these bongos here, well, they're more than just a drum set. You can use them to play various different games, and I'm looking forward to experiencing that for myself, and hoping that Sai over there hasn't just been on the wind up for this last 2 years. So the Donkey Kong bongos into the collection, probably to play Soul Calibur. Now next up, we're staying for another controller, and this one for the Nintendo again. Not officially licensed by Nintendo, but the fantastic 8-bit Do, and I picked up the 8-bit Do arcade stick. And there's two simple reasons for picking up this arcade stick. And the first one, 8-bit Do, they have the reputation for making quality products, so I've got no issue with anything that they put out, or have in any way so far. And two, of course, my Switch collection is mainly focused towards HD remasters of retro games and modern retro games, and the only way to play some of these classic games properly is with an arcade stick. Now I didn't have a game in the collection that would really take full advantage of this, so to test it out, because it's research purposes, I had to pick up the Cowabunga collection. So with this and this, it looks like I've got some good times ahead. So the arcade stick and the Cowabunga collection into the collection for good. Now next up is another controller, and it's another controller to make playing a game better. Or maybe better, maybe worse, I don't know, because I haven't tried it yet. It's a controller that I never thought I would have in the collection. It's a Sony controller, and it's for a game that I absolutely detest. Now anyone who knows me knows that I struggle with Resident Evil 4, but will I now, with this, pick up the Resident Evil 4 PlayStation Chainsaw. Now, the Resident Evil 4 chainsaw came out of the blue totally for me. Yes, it's something on a must-have list, but it's more of a Holy Grail must-have list. So this is where I believe that I have been a very good boy this year and didn't make it onto that naughty list. And not only getting the chainsaw in its case, but this particular one is in fantastic condition. I'll be frankly honest with you, I don't think it's been used before. I think this has come from a collector who has had it on display, and that is all that has happened with it. There's barely a mark on it, certainly not on the inside, and the only light markings on it are on the outer case, and they're so fine that you don't even notice them unless you're going in with a magnifying glass. But for me, however, this chainsaw will be used. It will be used to play Resident Evil 4. I will give it another bash just to see if the chainsaw makes me any better at controlling Leon, but I'm not holding out much hope for it. I will of course be using the chainsaw to play other games just to see how they fare with a chainsaw, because who knows, maybe Parappa the Rapper with a chainsaw will be fantastic, but we won't know until we find out. But this is most certainly a Holy Grail item, and one that I'm absolutely ecstatic to have into the collection, especially in the condition it's in, and now I just need to find a home for it somewhere. So the Resident Evil 4 chainsaw controller for the Sony PlayStation 2 in the collection. So there you go, my friends, that's my Christmas gifts from 2022 when it comes to video games. And well, not all of them. I still have some money that was sent to me left over to go and pick up something else, but I'm sure I'll be able to find something. Now, if any of these items are things that interest you, then let me know down in the comments. Did you play any of these games? Did you want to play the games and haven't got around to them yet? Well, drop it down in the comments, because the interaction between you and me, well, that's what makes YouTube special. I'm sure a lot of people will want to talk about the chainsaw and maybe even the arcade stick, because those are two items that I will be using to play other games with and test out, and let's see how they function when they're used for what they're not meant for as well. And I don't mean anything dangerous. I'm not going to put a mark on that wonderful chainsaw. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, cheerio!